Today is April the 14th, 2015. We're examining a tree specimen here that was cut down from a tree that was growing on where is now Miles Road, between Sachse Road and Hudson Drive. We have the exact location somewhere, we feel like, in some drawings and pictures, but we don't know at this moment exactly where that was. But the tree was kind of special. A lot of the people in the community, so we wanted to preserve some history of it. It was cut down a section here about 7-8 inches, cross section was preserved, and it was sitting here in the Historical Society offices, and it was beginning to get deteriorated, and we was afraid it was going to eventually just kind of fall apart maybe. So we opted to have our esteemed colleague here, Mr. Gil Cowden, take it, preserve it, fix it all up real nice, and make it smooth and nice where we could put some maybe labels on it or whatever. Mr. Cowden is going to explain a little bit about what he did and how he did it and when he did it.
When it was brought to me, it was in pretty rough shape, of course, being chainsawed down. It had a lot of chainsaw marks in it. It was real dark and black from the weather. And basically what I did was, and there was also bark falling off of it, and I took and laid the bark aside, and then I took a rather large belt sander, and started sanding away at it, and took quite some time because it's uneven and like I said, it had a lot of chainsaw marks in it. So I belt sanded both sides of it until it was fairly smooth with a several-day process. And in the process of doing that, I noticed that there was, on this particular side of the tree, there was either a nail or a bullet from many years ago that had been shot into it or driven into it, and I left it in there. And then after all the belt sanding, I took a random orbit sander and went through multiple grits starting from 60 going all the way to 600 until this thing didn't have a mark in it and was slicked up real good. And then I glued the bark back on that was missing, well, not missing, but had fallen off. And once that was done, I decided to use a hand rub on it that I made myself out of 4 different products to preserve it, including the bark. I put it on the bark so the bark would darken up and stay on here forever. And so after hand rubbing it with my finish, I then took a 3 buffing wheels and buffed the whole thing to what you see right now, the finish that I have on it. And the last buffing wheel is carnauba wax, so it's going to last for a while looking like this. And it was quite an honor to do it because this tree was very historical in Sachse. And I love restoring old stuff like this. And after it was finished, we hauled it up here, and it's what you see in front of you now.
What are some of the black areas in there?
The black you see into this tree is where metal of some kind. In the inner leaves, which is real early in the tree's life, many years ago, this thing's at least 130 years old. That's where someone drove a nail in it, maybe to put a sign on the tree, maybe to hang something on the tree. As with that piece of metal that's in it, maybe they shot the tree. But anytime in wood that metal stays in the wood, it will oxidize and turn the wood black. So every place you see a black mark in this wood, someone has either driven a nail in it or shot it. Because that's pretty much what you get in the old trees. And then also in the tree, you have marks like this and marks like this. where something occurred, either someone hit the tree or a bad weather broke a limb off the tree in its early years, and then the tree grew around the scar and it leaves these kind of marks and these kind of marks on it. And of course the cracks are just drying out. But that's what the black comes from, metal of some kind in the tree. I haven't counted the rings yet. I started and I stopped at 100 because I just got lost. So the tree's at least 100, I expect 130 years old.
Yeah, it's nice and smooth. What we would like to do with it is either put some markings on here somewhere or another. We know when it was cut down, we know approximately when it was cut down. If you go back and say, here was World War II, here was World War I, here was when the city of Sachse was established, because this tree has been here during all that time. Kind of interesting.
Yes.
It's been here longer than you have.
Oh yeah, by about 100 and something years.
Is there any reason that we would turn the other side around? It's
Not really.
about the
This
same.
is the more interesting side.
Now this is about, let's see, we've got this,
It's 34 inches.
we're looking at, right here it's about 30, 31 that way,
Yeah.
about 34 this way.
30.
30 wide is about 7 inches, right, 7-inch section.
Yes.
About 31 inches this way, 34 inches this way, and about 7 inches thick. It's heavy.
And right here, which was not that many years before it was cut, is where someone either drove a nail in it or shot it with a bullet. I didn't want to dig it out to see what it was because it's just part of the history of the tree. But you can see how the tree, once it was scarred, the grain went crazy right here, growing around it until it healed itself.
Yeah, that piece of metal is still in it, isn't it? That silver spot is a...
Yes, that's the one I didn't want to mess with because it's interesting. Never know what it was.
What if that could be like a piece of wire from a chain,
Could
fence
be.
or something?
It could be. Being as this tree was it in the road to begin with?
I'm not sure where
It could be
it was
part of
where the road is.
line that was put up.
Yeah, it was where the road is now, but
Yeah.
it, it may have been right on the edge of the
It
road.
might have been off the road and someone hung a wire on it to close, or there's no telling. I had counted and I was thinking what I counted down to there was around 30 years ago whenever that happened.
So that would have put it about 1970.
Someone may have just hung a sign there. I remember right, I counted 30 rings down to that. It might be a little more than that.
Yeah, there's several places where it's got the black
Yeah.
residue, oxidation.
There's a lot of black in it. There's been a lot of things driven into it or shot into it. And the bark is remarkably preserved for the amount of time. This was cut down approximately 15 years ago. And when I got it, only 3 pieces of bark fell off that I hadn't put back on. The rest of it was solid, which is indicative of an oak tree. They're hardy trees. And very difficult to cut down. And as a testament, I can say very difficult to clean up. Here's another spot. You can see how straight this is? A wonder of nature. It stays straight. This was a limb that this many years ago was either broken off or cut off. And then it just kept growing until you got regular grain back around it up above it. And right here you can see when they cut it off and how deep into the tree that the limb grain went. Also, when you're looking at the rings, when you have whiter white rings, you have more rain during those years. When you have real thin rings, you have more drought conditions, less rain for those years. So you can also look in the history of a tree by its rings what kind of weather Sachse had over the last 130 years as far as rain goes. And with some of this stuff, it looks like they had some rough weather every now and then. A very beautiful piece of wood.
Some of those cracks go all the way through. You can see light through it.
Yes. I treated those so they wouldn't keep cracking as time went by, as it's being shown. I treated the interior of them with a product that stops the cracking process. And I wanted to leave it as natural as possible, so I didn't want to mess with trying to fill cracks and stuff.
And it turned out really nice.
It's oak is a beautiful wood. You can see why it was used for so many years and still is for furniture.
Well, is there anything else you can think of interest on that?
Nothing else.
All right. Well, we can.
What do you think?
Oh, I think it's kind of good. I think it'd be nice. I mean, you know, we're not trying to make a movie, you know, where it's got to be just perfectly scripted. What we're trying to do is to. It's kind of like the wedding, you know. We found there's little hitches there and here and there but that's just part of it, you know.
Yep.
This turned out really nice. I think you did a superb job in preserving, you know, try to.
It was fun to do. It really was. It wasn't easy, but I'm telling you, to take something that is absolutely a mess and to make it look like this is a lot of fun.
Gratifying, isn't it?
Hard on an old guy's knees because you can't do this up in the air. it's on the floor when you're standing. But I'm gonna tell you what, it's worth every minute of it because look at it, it's beautiful.
It is.